Welcome to A Walk in My Stilettos, where our goal is to help you walk in your greatness. I'm your host, McKinney Smith. Hey, Faith Walkers. Thank you for joining us on the A Walk in My Stilettos podcast, where we have conversations with amazing women that are letting us take a step into their shoes. I help women strengthen their resilience muscle, own their stories, and conquer their fears so they can reach their goals. I get inspired when I see another woman succeeding, but what interests me more is her backstory and her mindset on how she got there. So today's guest is about to bless us with her testimony, and since you're already here, you may as well subscribe. Today we have a special treat for you because we actually have a woman with the real name Faith Walker. I know I call my community Faith Walkers because we're all here walking by faith. But today's guest, her real name is Faith Walker, and she's a mother, a singer, a songwriter, living with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer for over 10 years that has metastasized to her lungs and bones over 15 years after her original diagnosis. She continues to defy the odds and is thriving. And it's become her purpose to raise awareness and inspire others through her music and sharing her story of resilience. Faith is an ambassador for hashtag Feel It on the First, a movement created to remind women to take control of their lives and the importance to check their breast. Please welcome to the show, Faith Walker.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. I'm happy to be here. This was kind of a long time coming. Had a couple delays, but we're here.
Nothing happens before its time, but I definitely want to thank you for coming on. And, before we started recording, we were talking about how I call my community Faith Walkers, and it's a blessing that someone within my community was like, hey, you should actually interview Faith Walker. And I was like, there's someone with the name Faith Walker? Okay, I definitely need to interview her.
That's so funny.
So thank you.
Definitely. I'm always happy to share my story, and I feel it's kind of like my purpose to share it, to inspire other people and let them know that they're not alone and that they can make it through a hard time.
Absolutely. I was looking into, your background and your story, and I'm like, wow, you are a woman of resilience. You are, and like you said, this interview was, a long time coming. We had scheduled, and then you weren't well. And I'm just grateful that we've been able to reschedule and have this conversation because I am so interested in hearing your story and your mindset because it is so inspiring. And I'm just giving you a disclaimer. I'm a crybaby, so I might not make it through this episode without crying.
Me too. I had some delays. So much has happened since we were first supposed to do the interview. It's been such a roller coaster ride the past couple months. So I'm glad that I'm, in a good place right now and we're able to do this.
Amen. Amen. I love to start the show with an icebreaker question and ask people what their names mean, because I believe that every time someone says your name, that they're declaring that meaning to you. So as women, we have, all these different titles that we go by. And I just love the fact that your name is Faith Walker. Like, I actually just want to know, what inspired your parents for coming up with that?
Yeah, there is a story to it. So last name's Walker. Obviously, I just couldn't do much to change that. But being my first name, my parents. Well, my dad was a little bit of a hippie, so he wanted to name me Moonflower, and my mom was not having that. Like, there's no way she's going to be Moonflower Walker, and I'm so thankful that he said that. So he wanted to name me after his mother. Then he said, her name's Vera, and my mom's like, oh, no, I can't. It's a nice name, but I can't name my baby Vera. Like, she just couldn't see it. And they looked in a baby name book, and it said Vera meant to have faith. So she's like, oh, we can name her Faith. And then that's kind of how it all came about. And it's interesting because, like I was telling you before, a lot of people think it's a stage name, but it's my actual name. And just because of everything that I've been through in my life, they're like, oh my gosh, like you are living your life like so true to that name.
Yeah.
Like, you're Faith Walker for real. So I think it's been something that's kind of been encouraging on the way. I feel like they're like,
imagine.
Yeah, for sure. That's how it came about. Glad I'm not Moonflower.
It's interesting. That original idea of even asking women that come on the show what their names mean was because I grew up hating my name because McKinney, I mean, imagine children can be so cruel sometimes. So the way that my name got made fun of, and my parents, I don't know if they lied to me intentionally or that's what they believed back then, but they told me that it meant beautiful one. And I was like, okay. So growing up, I just, when people are like, oh, that's an interesting name, I'm like, well, it means beautiful one. But as an adult, and I started to dig deeper into, my history and things about my upbringing and background, I discovered that Makini is Swahili for strength of character. And that made me embrace my name even more. It made me more comfortable with the uniqueness of my name. And I always thought it would be interesting to ask everybody else, like, what does your name mean, or where did it come from? Or, how did your parents come up with that name? But I'm just blown away that your name is Faith Walker. I love it.
I love it too. I do.
So what did you want to be when you were a little girl?
I think for as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a singer. I think there was like a brief period before that, or kind of like on and off, where I was like, oh, I want to be a lawyer. But then I realized like what it was really about, and I wasn't interested in all the paperwork and all the stuff that you don't see on TV. So I was like, oh, forget that. I'm sticking to being a singer. So I guess I just always envisioned being, that and a songwriter.
It's interesting. Just recently I had Julie Black on the podcast, and I was saying to her, like, if there was one gift that I wish I was born with, it would be the ability to sing, because I think outside of the shower, nobody wants to hear me singing. And
oh, no.
so, I feel like it's a gift that you guys are born with, but I feel like there comes an age or a certain point where you discover that you can sing. So I guess, when did you discover that you had that gift?
I think I would say maybe 7, 8, 9, like somewhere in that range. And I think, I'd always sing, but, and my mom would be like, oh, you have such a beautiful voice. But I'm like, you're my mom. Like, you have to do that.
Right.
But I remember like a babysitter of mine, she was like braiding my hair and I was singing, and she's like, oh, you have a beautiful voice. And I'm like, okay. So then that was like a reinforcement of like, oh, someone besides my mom thinks I can sing. And I started writing a little bit here and there and just singing songs that I loved. And then around the age of 14 is when I started to record my own music in the studio and write like complete songs. So it was around 14 that I think I started to take it seriously. But I think, around probably 7, 8 years old is when I discovered that maybe I have a gift. I also, my father, he sang backup and played backup for a lot of different Detroit artists. He was actually hanging out with Gladys Knight and the Pips the night that he met my mom. So he was in the scene, and my mom, she just like loves Motown and soulful music, and she would always I'm sorry, Mom, but she can't sing. She knows she can't sing. She says, if I was singing, I would be like the best singer, because she feels it, So yeah, I think it was kind of like, it was there in my upbringing, but, it took kind of like someone outside of that to kind of make me take notice that, okay, maybe I have something.
So you took it serious at 14, but I guess, what's the story behind you deciding that, for your adult life, you want to become a musical artist? What inspired that? Or how did you get to that point?
I think it was just a feeling that was my purpose. And I just kind of like jumped into it, and once I kind of like committed to something, I kind of kept going with it. At that time, I was really just trying to hone my craft and get better at what I was doing, because I wasn't formally trained in music. I just always made up melodies and, made up songs just off the top of my head. So I think that for me, it was probably like a slower evolution than some artists that have, that piano background or, played an instrument at a young age. So
Mm.
that's one thing that I wish that I would have taken advantage of. If I could go back, I think I would have definitely taken some piano lessons. I think that would have helped a lot.
Yeah, it's never too late,
That is true. I won a contest a couple years ago. It was a Bob Marley cover contest for the museum where I live, and I ended up winning that. And part of the prize was music lessons. So I ended up taking, I think it was like maybe 6 or 8 weeks of piano. So I have a little bit of the basics down, but again, I think it's something that you have to really practice and stick with if you're gonna, keep it going and build upon that. So I feel even just that little bit of lessons that I did take did kind of open my eyes to certain things and show me certain things that I really didn't pay attention to before. So yeah, you're right. It's never too late. It took me a long time, and hopefully I can do some more.
Yes, yeah, I believe you can. I believe you can. When I was little, I mean, we couldn't afford, a piano or anything like that, but we were in, I believe it was like a plaza with the Winners, and there was a piano store. And my mom, I had asked her if I could go next door to look at the pianos. And she said, okay, she'll be there in a minute. And I went over to the piano store, and I'm walking around, and my mom had come into the store, 5 minutes later, and I was sitting there playing on the piano. But my neighbor had taught me how to play a couple of songs just by ear on her keyboard. So I'm sitting in the piano store and I'm playing. My mom was walking in looking for me. And when she discovered that, I was sitting there playing the piano, she was like, wow. So she ended up putting me in piano lessons, but I couldn't read musical notes. And I ended up not continuing with the piano lessons. Right? I don't understand. To me, they're not
caught on to reading music. Like, part of me expected it to come easy to me, I think. And even in school, they tried to teach us, and I just wanted to play by ear. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm the same. I could never read musical notes, even in school. So when my mom put me in the piano lessons, and I didn't do well with the piano lessons because you had to do things by playing the notes and reading, the notes, I couldn't do it. So if you asked me to play something by ear back then, I could. If you showed me how to play and I watched your fingers, I could, but I couldn't read the notes. Right. So going through school and we had to play instruments, like I learned to play the trumpet by ear. I learned to play the piano by ear. I learned to play, the recorder, all these things. I made it through school, but I could never read notes. So I always admire people that could actually understand what those notes are saying.
Absolutely. Definitely. I can definitely relate to that.
So I've had quite a few women who have come on the show and shared their experience of when they discovered that they've had cancer. And it's been different, I'm going to say different types of diagnosis of cancer, but everyone's story is unique. So, can you share with us how you discovered that you first had cancer?
Yeah, of course. So for me, I was 26 years old when I was first diagnosed. And what happened was I had some milk discharge. And I was like, okay, why is milk coming out of me? I had 2 young kids at that time, but my youngest was like 3. So there was no breastfeeding going on, anything like that. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of odd. So what happened was I went to my family doctor, and my family doctor sent me for a breast ultrasound. And it was one of those situations where they're like, don't call us, we'll call you. Like, I'm calling and they're like, no, if anything's wrong, we'll call you. Nobody called me. So about 3 months later, I found a lump. And they said, okay, we're going to send you for another breast ultrasound. And when I went in for the results, my family doctor said, yeah, you still have a lump and it's doubled in size. I'm like, what do you mean still? You've never told me I had one in the first place. Right. So that was like my first experience of really being let down by the medical community, because I feel that if I knew that, then I would have been looking out for it, for some type of change, So at that point, they said that, oh, it's probably nothing. It's probably not cancer. You're young. You don't have a strong family history. So, I was about to go on my first vacation. They're like, go have fun. Don't worry about it. They did a biopsy and they're like, we'll have the results when you get back. So I came back from vacation. I had my youngest, he was my youngest son at the time, who has severe autism and he's nonverbal. I didn't have anyone to watch him, so I had him with me at the appointment thinking, oh, it's nothing, because they really had downplayed it. But yeah, I went in to see this specialist and he's like, well, it is breast cancer. And I was just like in complete shock. My son's like running around the room making noises and I'm just trying to calm him down. And I was just like a wreck. And I went out to my car and just started bawling. And I called my mom and I was just like, it's cancer. Like, I was just completely shocked because I didn't see it coming, just because it was downplayed so much. Oh, it's probably nothing. It's probably nothing at your age, so that was my first diagnosis and my first, time hearing those words, you have cancer.
Wow. I'm deeply sorry that that happened to you and that you had to experience that. And it's very disappointing when I hear other stories of people who, we live in Canada and we talk about our healthcare system and all these amazing things, but, to be let down by that same healthcare system.
I can't even count how many times it's happened to me. So it's become something that has taught me that I really have to be vigilant and advocate for myself, because if I don't, nobody else is going to. And I don't think they really make you aware of that. It's like, you just do what the doctor says, do what you're told, and don't question anything. It's really disappointing. You learn that doctors are human. I get that part, but there's a lot of, I feel, deceit and a lot of things that are kept back and a lot of things that are at the doctor's discretion, whether they want to tell you or not. So I think it's really important, to ask for your medical records and ask your questions. And to be honest, I record my doctor's appointments most of the time because I've had situations where I've been like bold-faced lied to. So I just have to protect myself.
Wow. Yeah, wow. I have goosebumps right now. Recording your doctor's visits, that's something that, I didn't think of before. That would have definitely come in handy for me last year. But the healthcare system last year let me down pretty big. And because I had already, had my stint of running for MPP in the 2018 election, because I'd made friends with people in the political arena, and I shared my story, my healthcare issues with them. And there were so many people that said, yeah, you could go after the healthcare system, you could fight this, you could do this. But by the time I had gone through healing, I was exhausted. I didn't have the capacity to go through what would be probably a long marathon of legal battles with the healthcare system. So it's kind of just using your voice to make other people aware that they need to be very vigilant with their own health and not always take their word for it. And if you feel like something's wrong, listen to your body. Even if, the doctor's saying there's nothing, because I can tell you many stories where myself and other women that I've had on here have experienced that. So it's very important to fight, especially women of color, because most times we're not believed for our healthcare issues and the things that we complain about. It's kind of brushed off.
Absolutely. That's why I think, just having that recording is just like backup. And I don't need, to be honest, I don't even know if that's legal. Because I don't tell them, I just hit record. But I don't care. It's helpful in other ways too, because sometimes you're in an appointment and you get like all this information and you're just like on overload and you're like, what did they just say? And you can go back and listen, or you can play it for a family member if you don't have to go over everything that they said again and again. But I think that those situations with, being let down by the medical profession happen far too often. And I don't think that people are really aware of how often it does happen and how common it is, especially, being a young person. I've been involved with YAC, which is Young Adult Cancer Canada, and just doing like their survivor conferences and meeting other people that are like 18 to 40 that have been diagnosed with cancer. It's a real commonality for, especially because of our ages, for, things like this to happen, where things are really downplayed. And like you said, you're fighting your battle for your health. You don't want to fight another battle. And I was told, going up against like the medical profession. Everybody sticks together, and it's very, very hard to prove any medical malpractice. So about, I would say there was probably about 4 or 5 instances where I wanted to do something, but I didn't do anything until recently. I won't go into it too much, but I am going to do something about, I've joined a class action suit for one of the issues. So
good for you.
So because, I'm like, okay, I can't let this keep happening to me. Somebody needs to answer for some of this, some of what's happened, because, I really feel that if I didn't advocate for myself, I wouldn't be alive today.
Right, right. Wow. I had read somewhere that the cancer had spread to your lungs during your last pregnancy. Is that correct?
During my last pregnancy, it spread to my spine. So my son, he's going to be 12 soon. And that was my second cancer diagnosis. So after that, I had, I've been pregnant with my son. And so my second diagnosis was, I was about 6 months pregnant, and I was having back pain for about 3 months, and they couldn't figure out why. And nobody had really expressed to me that, you know what, this can be a chronic illness. This can come back. I always felt like, okay, I paid my dues. Like, I went through mastectomy, chemo, radiation, like the whole 9 yards. Like, I never thought it would come back at that point. So none of the doctors put 2 and 2 together, but I ended up falling, and I fractured my spine. I was about 24 weeks pregnant. I fractured my spine, and they finally gave me an MRI and said, oh, okay, your spine's fractured. I'm like, hey, what does that mean? They're like, well, it broke because there are tumors in your spine.
Wow.
Like the cancer must have been a microscopic cell that traveled through your bloodstream, and, it came back. And then the hormones during pregnancy, my cancer was really estrogen sensitive. So, nobody really told me those things. They were things I had to find out the hard way or find out on my own. But what ended up happening is they tried to keep my pregnancy going. And when I was about 27 weeks, they were trying to get me to 30 weeks so that I could have my son at the hospital we were at, and he wouldn't have to go to like a specialty hospital. So I think 30 weeks was kind of the cutoff for that. So this is one of the lessons I had to learn the hard way. I had been in so much pain, but I felt better this one night. I felt better, and one of those people, like, I want my independence so bad that sometimes someone just needs to tell me just to sit down or or ask for help, So I had gotten up in the middle of the night. I was in the hospital, and I went in the washroom, and all of a sudden, like, my back just gave out, and I fell on the ground, and I felt like my body just shattered into like a million pieces. And that's when I had fractured my spine again. So it was like in 2 spots. And then they were like, okay, we need to get this baby out. So I ended up having my son at 27 weeks, and he was a 2-pound, 5-ounce baby. So tiny. They had 9 doctors come from Othertown Hospital, from McMaster, and they, delivered him, saw him for maybe a minute or 2, and then they took him away, and he was at MAC for a month. I didn't see him for a month, and the next day I had a 9-hour back surgery to fuse my spine with rods and screws. So I was recovering at that hospital while he was, about an hour away in the NICU, trying to make sure he could breathe on his own, and all the things that premature babies have to achieve before they're able to go home. So after about a month, they brought him to the same hospital where I was. So then for 2 months we were at the same hospital, and after 3 months total that we both came home, and came home in a wheelchair, and I had to learn to walk again and go up the stairs with a crutch. And, I went from the wheelchair to a walker to crutches to a cane. When I woke up from my surgery, I had what's called a foot drop. So the top of my foot is like paralyzed. I can't lift my right foot. So I had to, I still have that to this day, and it's been almost 12 years. It's something that I deal with every day, but I had to learn to teach myself to drive with 2 feet, because, I couldn't trust that right foot to be on the brake and the gas. So there's a lot of different things that I had to do, and I had a lot of nerve damage. So I live with that pain every day too. So, the spinal fusion definitely helped me, but it also brought new health issues.
Wow.
Yeah,
But
it's a lot. It's a lot to swallow. I'm like, that's short.
I mean,
A cold note.
but my heart definitely goes out to you, and I've got like goosebumps right now, and I'm almost lost for words. And as much as it's a lot to hear, I think the importance of you sharing your story, especially the things that were not told to you, about how the cancer can come back or where it can come back, things to look out for, like
Mm-hmm.
those things are important for anyone listening. Because there was another guest who was on the podcast who she had, her original diagnosis was with breast cancer, and she removed the breast thinking, okay, well, let's just take it, so I'll be fine. And they allowed her to keep her nipple, and her second diagnosis, which they never told her existed, ended up being nipple cancer. So it's like,
Oh, yeah.
Hearing your stories, it's important because there's so much we're not told. And it's also important to hear your resilience and how you got through those things. Because as someone who is just sitting here listening, and I mean, I've had my share of struggles in life, but just listening to your story, I'm just like, oh my God, how did you get back up from that? How did you deal with it? Like, how did you even manage to take care of a newborn while you're still learning to walk?
Well, that's the thing. For some reason, I just always bounce back. So I have 3 kids in total. So when I brought my youngest home, I didn't hold him standing up for the first 6 months of his life. My oldest was, I think, maybe 9 at the time, and I had to stay on one floor of the house for the whole day. And then basically, I'll backtrack for a second. Before I left the hospital, I had a lot of people questioning and doubting, well, how are you going to do this? So they said, they wanted to know, they wanted to sit down with me at the table, and they wanted me to explain to them how I was going to do this, with, a son with autism and 2 other kids, a a preemie. So I wrote everything out. I figured out how it was going to go. I'm going to stay on one floor for the day. I'm going to do this. I'm going to have this person come in and do this. I'm going to have my friend do my grocery shopping for me. Like, I had everything planned out. And what was kind of degrading is they came in, I thought it was going to be like at an actual table, this meeting, but they came in like surrounded my hospital bed and like interrogated me. Like, how are you going to do? I said, you know what? There are people with disabilities, people in wheelchairs that parent children.
Right.
So why can't I do it? It wasn't easy, but I couldn't hold them standing up for the first 6 months, like I said. And then over time, I just started to get stronger. And I think I just put one foot in front of the other. When I don't know what to do, that's kind of like my go-to is like, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. I think it's like Dory, and just keep, I just always just kept going, and I always bounced back. And from that time, of that diagnosis, I'll explain metastatic breast cancer. Just, I don't know if all your viewers or listeners are familiar, but metastatic breast cancer is when you have breast cancer and then it spreads to another area in your body. So it spread to my spine, or metastasized to my spine. So that's what made it metastatic cancer, which is stage 4 cancer, which they say we cannot cure this. We don't know. They told me, we don't know if you have a year or 20 years. We can't tell you. The average lifespan is 2 to 3 years at that point. And I'm now going to be celebrating 12 years in a couple months.
Amen.
So I've definitely defied the odds for some reason. I just feel like, it's not my time yet. And I have a purpose. It gave me more of a purpose with my songwriting as well, just because I wanted to tell my story in a different way, and in a way that only I could tell it, but where other people could really understand and relate. So it kind of gave me new purpose with my music as well. A lot of experiences in life have given me like that urgency to do certain things, like create memories and travel. I said, I'm going to travel. I'm going to go somewhere every year because, that's something that I want to experience. There have been a lot of things. There are still a lot of things that I want to do. And I don't know how long I have, I actually recently, like we were saying, I've been in and out of the hospital. About 3 weeks ago, I was told that I had 2 days to live.
Whoa.
I was in the hospital. I was having trouble breathing. What happened was they put a Pleurex catheter in my lung, which is like a tube in my lung because I kept getting fluid in it, this is a lesson in intuition, because I always like to follow my intuition, and I was so dead set against it. So dead set against it. But they had told me, like, hey, there's a chance that your lung will stop inflating if you don't get this. We can't keep, what they were doing was called a thoracentesis. So they would drain the fluid with the needle from my lung, and I had to do that every few weeks. So they're like, with this catheter in there, it's, easier to consistently drain it. It's, drained every few days by a nurse, and hopefully it will fix the problem. So I was like, okay, fine. I'm kind of mad at myself for not listening to my intuition, but you know what? That was like a big lesson for me, because what happened was it ended up getting infected within 2 weeks. And so they put me in the hospital, and they actually used synthetic snake venom to drain out the infection. So they would like inject the snake venom and clamp it, and then I'd have to walk around, and then they would release it, and then it had this drain going constantly. So they drained 5 liters of fluid from my right lung. So if you can imagine, like 5 liters of like anything is a huge amount. And so what ended up happening is, like, from then I had a trapped lung, which means like my lung will not inflate properly. So then I was, back in and out of the hospital for different reasons, probably 5 times in the past few months. And they had told me, like, oh my gosh, your vitals were all over the place. And I had too much carbon. I always get carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide. Carbon dioxide, I always get them confused, but I had too much of that in my system and not enough oxygen. My heart rate was like 170 something. Like, my oxygen level was like down to 60 at its worst point. And so they basically came and they said, we want to know what you want to do. We don't recommend, this doctor was not my doctor, but he said, I think about my family, and I say, like, I would not recommend, going to the ICU and having machines hooked up to you, like a ventilator, bones cracking. I'm just like, oh, like, what? And then I said, why, what's the urgency with this? And he's like, honestly, like, you only have a couple days. And I was like, complete shock. I was not expecting that. And then somewhere, I had told my family, my children, that I only had a couple days to live. Then within a couple days, I just took a turn. My vitals started getting better. They drained my left lung, and I just started getting better and better. And then they were like, okay, at first they were like, chemo will kill you. Like, we can't give you chemo. It's going to kill you. Then they were like, okay, you're well enough to do chemo again, which, to be 100% honest, for 10 years, I've been saying I'm not going to do chemo again. But the fear that was put in me from them saying you have 2 days to live, all the emotions that I went through in that situation, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm doing it. So that's a whole other story. But I faced so many different emotions, just being told that you only have a couple days to live. Like, so many different things that you would never think about go through your head, especially when you have children and you're like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. From a will to, guardianship to, I wanted to leave my kids cards and things for their birthdays and all this. And I was just like, what? Like, days, a couple days. I wasn't not expecting that going into the hospital, but within a couple days, they had me starting chemo. I did 1 chemo, and then they sent me home the next day. And since then, I've been steadily getting better and better every day. I had a pain pump, which I was hoping to get rid of by the end of the month. It kept falling out, and it was driving me nuts. It came out about 10 times. I said, screw this. This is a message from somebody that I don't need this thing. So I got rid of my pain pump. My oxygen, I had 24/7. Now I'm at about a 97-98% oxygen without using the oxygen machine.
Wow.
So I'm barely even using it. Like, I just came upstairs without the oxygen which I wasn't able to do 3 weeks ago. So I definitely, I know it wasn't my time, but that's the closest I've come to thinking that it was.
So, first of all, I said I was warning you that I wasn't going to be able to get through this without crying.
Okay.
Honestly, like, thank God the doctors were wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to downplay and use the word inspiring, but just to hear the strength in which you just share your story so openly. The things that we take for granted and the roller coaster of emotions and things that you've probably had to experience, not just throughout, your life and all these different diagnoses, but even just in the past month. Like, we all know that, tomorrow isn't promised to anyone. And I talk about it all the time. I lost my sister in 2012 and she didn't know she wasn't going to, live to see another day. So it's like having this opportunity for you to, like you said, to do things for your kids or to do it. I can't even imagine what you're feeling or what you're going through, or I'm like a mess right now.
Yeah, it's so much. No, it's so much to process, and I'm so sorry about your sister. Do you mind telling me what happened to her? I know you're asking questions.
Yeah, I mean, my sister, in 2012, it was a really hot summer, and she, was having issues with fibroids and dealing with, having to have blood transfusions and all kinds of stuff, and, hemorrhaging, and it just got really intense and really scary. Like, we would go to the mall, and from the walk from the mall door to her car, her pants would be drenched in blood, and, but for her, that became her new normal. It was like, oh my God. And and then there was one Sunday, because we would go to church together. We didn't live in the same house at the time, but, we would meet up and plan to leave at the same time to get there at the same time. And I called her that morning, and my niece came on the phone, who is, her only child, and was like, Mom's having trouble breathing. She doesn't want to scare anybody, but, can you get her to go to like the hospital, the doctor or something? And we went to church, and she said that she would go get it looked at after service. And she had gone up to the altar to pray. And when she came back, she was crying, and, she's like, I am just having trouble breathing. And we thought maybe, it was super hot and humid that summer. Maybe she developed asthma or something. And my mom ended up taking her to Emerge that afternoon. And, I was arguing with my ex-husband at the time because he didn't want to return my son home. So I had to leave. But then my sister texted me and said they're going to keep me for observation. And they kept her for observation. And the next morning she went into cardiac arrest, I think before 6 a.m. And they tried for 40 plus minutes to revive her. And they did, but they induced her into a coma. And the damage that was done, she was in a coma for 3 weeks because we refused to let go. We reached out to different specialists, and we had churches coming to pray. But after the 3 weeks, like her body shut down, her organs started to shut down. They were deteriorating. And they took her off. They legally declared her brain dead after 3 weeks. So, that tomorrow isn't promised. No. And again,
and that's hard.
Issues with the healthcare system, where because she was on blood thickeners because of the bleeding, but we were told that she may have been given blood thinners when she came in there because they thought she had a blood clot, I think, in her lung. But again, the healthcare system and their cover-ups. So there was a lot of questions and a lot of things that didn't get done while we were grieving. And then, there's the statute of limitation of timeframes. And so, yeah. But just hearing your story.
So sorry to hear that. I actually relate to, everybody's story is different, but I definitely relate to the feeling of not being able to breathe. It's such a horrible feeling. My cancer, after going to my bones over the past 2 years, spread to my lungs and now my liver. So just with it in my lungs has caused so many issues, and like not being able to breathe is like the worst feeling. And, I've had times where they've thought I had a blood clot, and I've had blood transfusion. So, I definitely relate to a lot of just the unknown of not knowing, like, what's wrong, like why can't anybody figure out what's wrong with me? But something's wrong, So I'm really sorry for your loss. I really am. I'm sure.
Thank you.
I'm sure it's still hard with, these many years later,
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sorry for everything that you have had to experience, and it is inspiring to hear how you've been able to turn your pain into your purpose, and how you have the strength to be so open and to share your story and your experiences. So thank you for that. Have you found that motherhood changed how you've viewed life? Like you just said, they gave you 2 days to live, and you were thinking about what you needed to do for your children.
hmm I definitely feel like with my first diagnosis, I was just like, okay, I got to be here for my kids. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to, remove my breast. I'm going to have 6 months chemo. I'm going to have 6 weeks of radiation. So it's kind of just like there's no choice. And I just knew I was going to be okay that first time. The second time, it hit me a lot harder. Like I said, I had 3 kids at that time. I'm sitting there pregnant with this little itty bitty baby, and I'm being told, well, we don't even know if you have a year to live to be able to raise him. And now, he's going to be 12 soon. And I feel so lucky to be able to actually, be here to raise him and have these memories. But they definitely keep me going. I feel like my kids really need me. And so I think that has been something that's been a positive for me, just because they've kind of been like my reason to live. And I've gone through periods where, especially recently, I've just been like, okay, if my breathing's not going to get any better, if my pain's not going to get any better, I don't know how long I can do this, and they really just got me through that period of time until I could feel stronger, until I could feel, okay, I'm starting to feel a little bit better. Because when you don't know what to expect, you don't know if it's just going to be like all downhill from here, or like this for the rest of your life. It's really hard. It's really hard. Like you kind of have to remind yourself that that nothing's permanent kind of thing. But at the same time, in that moment, you feel like it is. So I definitely think that they have pushed me to do everything, and like I said, create memories and have little traditions with them. And even though I had mobility issues and pain, I tried to do things that I was able to do. So like every Monday we'd have pizza movie night, and I've been doing that for the past 12 years. So we still do that, and just little things. When I just had my very close call, I had some family members help. My mom and my sister, they went and got me like these little. I was gonna do Build-A-Bear. I had lost a friend. I've lost a few friends along the way, but my good friend Kirsten, she had Build-A-Bears with her voice in them for her son, who's the same age as my son. So I wanted to do that for him. But because of the whole pandemic, there's like no Build-A-Bears open, I don't think.
Right.
They couldn't find any anyway. So they ordered me like these star pillows, and you can record your voice in them. So I have those. So I want to see now. I feel like, okay, I have the time to do all those things that I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I'm trying to, because before I felt like, okay, if I do these final things, it's like acknowledging that, okay, it's my time. But if I don't do them, then I'm kind of, saying that I'm not ready. But then with the very close call, I'm like, okay, I need to do these things now.
None of us are getting out of here alive. So, I mean, it's right. We're afraid to acknowledge that we may not physically be here one day, but none of us are getting out here alive. And after losing my sister, like that opened my eyes. I mean, she was 39 when she passed, and having my health issues when I was 39, waking up every day wondering if I was going to make it to 40, it forced me to go and get my will created and to get things in order for my children. And we don't want to think about it, but it's almost unfair that if something does happen and they have to deal with, the unknown because we didn't prepare for it. Culturally, there's a lot of other cultures that prep for these things. I guess, normal practices, but it's almost like we feel like if we avoid it and we don't accept that it's going to happen, that we can put it off. But if it's not your time, it's not your time. And I'm telling you, like, I can't even stop crying right now, but it's not your time, because every diagnosis that they've given to you, you have pushed way beyond that, your strength and your resilience. And I don't want to downplay what you may feel like, you know, on your down days or when you're alone, but your strength to keep pushing is so inspiring.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. You're going to make me cry now. Okay?
I'm sorry.
I warned you. So, but yeah, I think it's important. I have a vlog where I kind of share the ups and downs, but I think for me, I always try to just stay positive and, you know, show that side, but I was more reluctant to share the downs and the real struggle of it all. So now I'm like, kind of, I would tell the story, but I would be kind of detached from it. And I still am in some ways detached from it. It's like almost like I'm telling someone else's story. Because when
it's probably like a coping mechanism, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I just, I don't know. I guess there's different emotions and things that, you know, you kind of have to like compartmentalize a little bit and just, I don't know. I think that I've learned to do that in a lot of different ways just to get through it. But I just feel like, you know, it is my responsibility to share, you know, some of those tougher days. So I've been really proud of myself lately for doing that, because
and you should be.
I would be like afraid to show like the weaker side and like the side where I'm like, oh my God, this is hard, you know? So I'm trying to show that more. And I think that's just as important as showing, you know, the upside, because then people understand, okay, that's what she's really going through. And then she's, you know, this is where she's at now. So.
Yeah. I mean, I've had, you know, a lot of amazing women. All of the women that have come on have been amazing. But a huge part of what I try and drill down for this show is that it's great to see the highlight reel, but also understanding the behind the scenes and understanding the adversities that you amazing women have to endure or have had to endure to get to where you are, so that other women who are probably sitting at home right now, and maybe a woman who's just recently diagnosed and needs to hear the truth, or needs to hear what to expect, or needs to hear that she's not alone. Like, those are the things that have gotten me through my darkest days. It's not the highlight reels of seeing, you know, the pretty fancy online. Yeah. So thank you for being real.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to, you know, share my story and be real and open and honest. Like I said, I do feel like it's part of my purpose. And again, even with the songwriting, I don't want to like toot my own horn, but if anybody
toot your horn, girl.
Okay, toot my horn. If my proudest musical accomplishment was the last video I put out for Head in the Clouds remix, featuring Ray Robinson. And in that video, I don't know if you've seen it, but I definitely tell my story, but also the story of I think it's about 5 or 6 of my friends and family members who have been through some real adversity and found like a blessing on the other side. So they're all true stories. You know, most people can relate to at least one of them. So if you want to check that out on YouTube, it's Head in the Clouds remix. I'm definitely very proud of it. And I think that it has already inspired so many people. You know, there's not usually like a week or two that goes by where I don't hear from someone that says that it's inspired them. So that means so much to me. And my son's in there too. He's holding a sign saying I was a 2-pound, 5-ounce baby. And, you know, now I'm 10 and resilient and strong. And like I said, a bunch of other stories as well. So that's tooting my own horn.
Yes, listen, you have every right to toot your horn. And yes, I have seen the video. I'm a fan of that video. I'm also a fan of Ray Robinson. I was interviewed by him a couple years ago when he was doing the radio show. But yes, everyone needs to go and check out the video, Head in the Clouds. I have like so many questions, but I have like so many emotions right now.
I know it's going to be a long interview.
Okay, so I would love to know what's one thing that most people don't know about Faith.
People might not know that I'm a bit of a bookworm. I love to read, anything from novels to like biographical to, inspiring stories. I'm reading Spontaneous Remission right now, which is an amazing book. I recommend to anybody going through cancer, especially. But I have a book club, and we're the
Awesome.
book bunnies. And shout out to the book bunnies. So yeah, that's one thing that people might not know about me is that I do love to read, and that's something that didn't happen in my childhood or when I was a teenager. It happened after I was done school, and I didn't have to read. I just got to read because I wanted to, because it was interesting. So yeah, that's one thing.
I love it. I have a complete random question that I love to ask every woman that comes on the show. And
Okay.
so far it's been on point. So let's hope that it stays that way. But I basically came across this Reader's Digest article, and it basically, says what your favorite type of shoe says about your personality. So I would love to know, Faith, do you know, can you tell us what is your favorite type of shoe? Is it like a heel, a boot, a running shoe, flip-flops?
Okay. So I would say it's between two different ones. I would say either like a boot. I need something with ankle support because of my nerve damage. So a boot, or I love Converse. I love Converse. I used to have to wear a brace, and I had to buy like shoes like a size or two bigger, and then I'd put an insole in one, and then I have my brace in the other side. But the Converse had like just enough ankle support for me. So comfortable, classic. So yeah, I would say Converse.
Okay. I feel to read you both. So let's start with this. So high heel boot wearers take charge. In the event of a crisis, the person who loves wearing high heel boots will always be the one to take control of the situation. They're quick on their feet, and they are able to make clear, rational decisions. This woman is exceptionally self-assured, so people around her feel instantly safer in her hands. The high-heeled boot is a take charge kind of person. She loves being center stage and is very assertive.
That's pretty accurate. Pretty accurate.
I'm looking for the walking shoe, the sneaker. Read you. Yeah. Sneaker buffs get along with everyone. Are you someone who relates to people much younger than you, yet also feels comfortable conversing with someone much older? Sometimes you're an old soul, and sometimes you're the life of the party. For sneaker buffs, age truly is but a number. Because you get along with everyone, the sneaker is very versatile, a very open person willing to explore a lot of options and different ideas. They're energetic and ageless. They're really not young or old, and they seem to move fluidly through age-specific groups.
That's pretty accurate too. I think I'm a combination for sure.
You might be in between.
Yeah, I think I'm a combination of those two for sure. A lot of different elements of each one.
I love it. I love it. So tell the people where they can stay connected with you online.
Yeah, definitely. It's at Faith Walker Music on Instagram, Faith Walker on Facebook, and Twitter as well. Instagram is I would say my go-to, just because I can find it hard to keep up with all the different platforms. But so yeah, if you check me out on Instagram, there's a link to my playlist on YouTube in my bio, and I will post anything that's going on, any event, flyers, interviews, anything like that. So you can stay up to date on Instagram, I would say. And then my music is available on all platforms from iTunes to Spotify. So yeah, you can just search Faith Walker. My last project was my EP, and it was called Head in the Clouds. So you can look for that and there's 7 songs on that one as well.
Perfect. And I will definitely have the link to all of your platforms in the detail section so they won't have to search too far. They can just click and connect with you directly.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
No problem. So the final segment of the show, I call it a walk in her wisdom. And it's just a couple reflection questions where you share the first thing that comes to mind. If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say and why?
I think it would, I don't know what exactly it would say, but I think it would be something, that relates to my music, but also to my strengths. I don't know how much you can put on a billboard, but something that shows me, being strong and how that relates to my music. That makes sense.
Makes total sense. What new belief, behavior, or habit has improved your life in the last 5 years?
I would definitely say meditation. I meditate. I was meditating every night before bed for years. And actually, when I was in the hospital recently, I wasn't able to do that. So I'm just starting to get back into it. But it's helped me immensely just because my mind goes like nonstop all the time. So it's kind of, helped me to slow down. And, I have a playlist on YouTube that I just kind of built for myself where I can pick and choose. Like there's like 100 meditations in there for all different things. So whether I'm feeling anxious or, I want to try to focus on healing, guided meditation for, balancing the chakras, just all different types. So for whatever I need that night, then I just choose one. And I think that's been really big in my life, something that's been consistent over the past 5 years that I hope to keep doing.
I love it. Honestly, I have no words, Faith. Normally this is the part where I thank you for, taking the time to join us, but I am so humbled that we've been able to have this conversation and that you have allowed me to be a part of this moment in your life to share your story. So thank you. I am so humbled right now. Thank you so much, Faith.
You're so welcome. And thank you for taking the time and being, open and honest with me as well. And, willing to listen to some things that aren't always hard to hear. And you might end up in tears sometimes. But again, I think it's important to own our story. So
absolutely, these conversations are necessary.
Definitely. I commend you for, just this series in general. I'm sure has done so many positive things for your listeners. So I have a lot of respect for you in that way as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Faith. And to all of you Faith Walkers out there, until next time, subscribe on all platforms, rate the show, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Join the community of Faith Walkers and sign up for our weekly newsletter at awalkinmystilettos.com. And be sure to grab one of my personal development books available online everywhere. And if you can think of one person, and I'm going to challenge you because I know there's more than one person that you can think of that would receive value from hearing Faith's testimony today, but please share it with them. Be sure to screenshot this week's episode and tag us on Instagram. You can tag Faith at Faith Walker Music, and you can tag myself at The Real McKinney Smith, and continue to walk in greatness in your stilettos in a manner worthy of your calling.